Hello and welcome to Flying Bobbins. I'm Liz, nice to have you here today. I am going to be making today the Montauk trousers by Liesl & Co. Now, I've already made these as a short because I wanted to familiarise myself with the pattern. So here are my shorts that I made earlier, and I made these using the Atelier Brunette cactus linen fabric. I'm really pleased with how they've turned out, and I just made them as a short really to test the pattern and to familiarise myself before I went on and filmed this video. But they're so nice that I would say this pattern, although it doesn't come with a short, it's just as good for making shorts as it is trousers. To make the shorts, I just cut the leg, cut the pattern 7 centimetres below the bottom of that pocket and use that as a guide, and then I just double turned them 0.5 and then 1.5 centimetres. So that's how you do the shorts. What I'm going to do today is I'm going to make the trouser version using a Flying Bobbins sewing kit. So you can buy this pattern and a kit including the fabric and the notions that you need to make these trousers from flyingbobbins.com. And I'm going to have that in a range of gorgeous fabrics, including some viscose and linen fabrics from Atelier Brunette. So styling wise, I'm going to be doing the front patch pockets and the back patch pockets. It's got an elasticated waistband with a drawstring as well, and I've actually ordered some little cord ends to decorate those with too. So as a trouser goes, it's a fairly simple make. There's no zip to worry about, and the fit is very relaxed. So, you know, a fitted trouser might be tricky to fit. These are just pull on and fairly straightforward. So great introduction for trouser making. Size wise, let's have a look. It goes from a size 0 up to a size 20. And that is, to give you an idea, a waist of 25 inches up to a waist of 38.5 inches. And these are all this is an American pattern. So when you see a 0, that's probably like equivalent to UK size 4, and a 20 is probably an equivalent to a UK size 24 because the American sizes are 2 below the British sizes. Having said that, always look at the measurements. So waist 25 inches up to waist 38.5 inches. You do have some different variations on the choice of pockets. You can either use a patch or a welt pocket. I'm going to do the patch pockets. I think they're a little bit simpler and I really like the look of them. I think they're more flattering on the bottom area. So that's what I'm going to be talking you through today. So let's open up my Flying Bobbins sewing kit and take a look at everything you get inside that you're going to need to make your Montauk trousers. So here is my Flying Bobbins sewing kit. And like I say, you get everything that you need in here to make your trousers. And let's open that up and see what's inside. So you get your trouser pattern by Liesl & Co. You get some elastic for the waistband, and for this one I've chosen a ribbed non-roll woven elastic, and what this has is it's vertically woven so that it has a resistance to rolling. That's going to give you a nice flat waistband, which is flattering and comfortable. So quite a nice elastic to use for your waistbands. A couple of strips of inch wide or 2.5 centimetre wide interfacing to stabilise the pockets, and then you're going to get your piece of fabric. Now for my trousers I'm going to use this. This is 100% viscose. It's a plain woven challis from Atelier Brunette, and it's in a design called Shade. It's kind of depicting the shadows cast by tropical leaves, very summery. And this is in a colourway called Cactus, which is a cactus green colour on this kind of, I would call the ground colour kind of asparagus. It's like a very, very pale greeny white. So I'm going to use that. And I'd say you need about 2 metres of fabric, whichever size you're doing. If you're making the shorts, probably about 1 metre of fabric you're going to need. I'm then going to include in the kit your matching thread to go with whichever fabric you're choosing. And then last but not least, I have just popped this in my kit in particular, just because for that drawstring, what I like about Atelier Brunette is that they do matching bindings or coordinating bindings. So I actually thought that for my drawstring, it would look really nice to have that. This is a cactus coloured crepe bias binding, and I thought, you know what, that will look really nice as a finishing touch rather than using the same fabric. I'll go for a little contrast as a feature. So I'm going to put together a range of kits for this project. If you have a look on flyingbobbins.com, you'll see there's a fabulous choice. If you're using your own fabric, you can just buy the pattern. But if you want the full inner box kit, then those will be available as of from tomorrow. And then lastly, I've just popped a safety pin in there, and that's going to be really helpful for when you're threading your elastic and your drawstring through your waistband. So you really do have everything you need. So let's have a look at the pattern. You've got your body measurement guide here, and you've got your finished measurements in this table. So if you measure your waist and your hip in inches and then see which size you correspond to, I was pretty much bang on a size 8, which is a UK 12, and that seems about right for me. Having made the shorts, I'd say that they're a really true to size fit. If you're in between the two, go up a size, because it's a relaxed shape, and it's not going to look right if they're tight. But if they're loose, they're going to be drawn in by that elasticated waistband, and they're going to feel more comfortable. Remember that you're going to want to be able to sit down in them as well. You don't want them stretching and pulling around your hip area. So in between sizes, my advice, having made these, will be to go up. So if you just measure yourself, and then that's going to give you your size that you need. So inside your envelope, you get your instructions, which are on 2 folded up bits of paper like this, and I'll be following these instructions throughout the sew along today. And then you get your paper pattern, which is folded up like so. So it's probably quite tricky to see on the camera, but I will just talk you through the pieces that you have on here. If you're going to make the welt pocket, you've got your welt pocket pattern pieces. Then you've got your waistband back and front. You've got your leg, back and front. Your pocket facing, your patch pocket, your front pocket up here, and then your piece to make your tie. And then this is your pocket bag if you're going to do the welt pocket. Each piece is outlined for you as per the sizes. So 0, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12 and so on. Once you know which size you are, my tip is to grab a highlighter and just trace your chosen line with a highlighter. That makes it easy to see. And once you've done that, you can then cut out all of your pieces. And if you're in between sizes, like I said before, go up a size, because, for example, if your hips are a bit bigger than your waist, you can just draw that waist in with the elastic. And if your waist is a bit bigger than your hips, again, you don't want them too tight round your hip area. So just go with your sizes according to the envelope, and if in doubt, go up one. That's my advice. So the next job, or the first job I should say for you to do, is to just cut out the paper pattern pieces that you need. At the same time as you're doing that, you can pop your fabric in the washing machine, because you will want to pre-wash your fabric to eliminate shrinkage later on. So that's your first job. Now each pattern piece will have your grain line on it. And it's very important that all these grain lines are running parallel to the selvages and the fold. So after having washed my fabric, I pressed it and then I folded it in half with the selvages matching. So now I'm going to lay out my pieces, making sure that I measure the grain line against the fold or the selvage to make sure that it's running parallel, and I'll pin my fabric in place and then cut them out. So to measure the grain line, you just measure at one end from the fold or from the selvage. That's 18 centimetres. It doesn't have to be 18, it's just whatever measurement it is at the bottom. Pop a pin in there. You must make sure it's the same measurement at the top. Nudge it along a bit. There we go. So now that grain line is beautifully parallel to the fold there. And as you can see, you've got a lot of shaping on those trousers there coming in at the side. You know, if you matched up this line or this line, your trousers would be really off grain. And you want the grain to sit nice and true. That grain line is kind of like going at the centre front of your leg, like a plumb line hanging from your waist down. And you just want your fabric to fall and drape in that direction. And of course you also want all of your fabric pieces to be doing the same, especially with a printed fabric, even more so. But all fabrics should, when you're cutting out your patterns, you should always look at those grain lines and make sure that you're obeying the grain lines. And you will end up with a beautiful project that doesn't twist around too much and behaves nicely. Fabric that isn't cut on the grain line will kind of twist and stretch. And there we are. So I've just pinned that round the outside edge, and I'm going to do the same for these other pieces. Now you'll notice that I haven't got the back leg, I've just got the front leg here. I can't quite fit it all on my table, so I'll cut these pieces out, then I'll draw my fabric up, and then I'll cut my remaining pieces out on a separate round. So I'll cut out the bits that I can fit in, and then I'll draw everything up, and then I'll cut everything out again. And of course, because I'm on the fold, everything that I'm cutting is being cut out as a pair. So I've laid out my pattern pieces. I've got my trouser front there, my back pocket, front pocket, pocket facing, and the tie at the side there. Once I've cut that out, I can then draw my fabric up and lay on the remainder of the pattern pieces. Before I start cutting, just something to mention. Obviously these trousers are a particular length. If you're tall or petite, you have this line here, and it's at this point that you can either lengthen or shorten your pattern. Whatever you do on the front, repeat exactly the same on the back so that your legs match up. If you're going to lengthen it, then you cut along this line, split the pattern apart, stick some paper under, and then join up at the sides. If you're going to shorten, you just fold there, bring it back up on itself by the amount that you want to shorten it, and tape it, and then smooth off the lines at the side. If you're not sure on length, just grab yourself a pair of your trousers that you know fit you nicely, fold them in half and offer them up, just to compare the inside leg measurement. Go by the inside rather than the outside, because this can be changing as according to how high the waist is, whereas the inside leg is more of a reliable comparative measurement. Don't forget when you're doing that as well that you've got seam allowance. You've got ½ inch, so just about 1.2 cm's seam allowance included. So bear that in mind when you're comparing the length. I'm pretty average, I'm 5'4". I'm going to just go with the measurements as they are on the pattern. So I'm going to start cutting. I've measured from my selvage over at this side to my grain line, and I've measured from my fold to my grain line just to make sure that my pieces are all sitting nice and straight. So I'm now ready to cut out. The other thing you may notice as well is that my fold is here and my selvage is here. I just flipped my fabric round because I realised I had it the wrong way. What this does is it gives me a lovely big piece of fabric here, because this is the fold, and it's from that lovely big piece there that I can then cut my waistbands. So just refer to the lay plan guide. Okay, let's get cutting. I'm going to cut out a tie as well, even though I'm going to use my bias, but I thought if I cut a tie then I've got it if I change my mind. And also I could possibly thread this into my shorts that I've already made, and that might look quite pretty. Good old-fashioned scissors and pin. Okay, so you just want to cut right on the edge. Seam allowance is included. Keep your scissors nice and steady. Never cut in the air, always cut with the base of your scissors firmly on the table for stability. And we're just going to come round. And once you've cut out, the next thing that we'll do is just to mark on all of those notches and pattern markings, reference guides for all the lovely details that these trousers feature. So there's my first lot of cutting done. Keep your scraps because they'll be useful for testing your stitches. I now want to go round and just transfer any of the important pattern markings. So anywhere that I see a little triangle, I should just make a snip as a notch. Just a tiny one, just 1/2 centimetre into the edge of the fabric. If you want to, you can mark those little notches on with a little bit of chalk. It's up to you. I'm just going to use a little snip to mark them in place. Just make sure that you are cutting those triangles at the size that corresponds to your size that you're cutting out. So those little notches have now been snipped into. Now you can see anywhere that you've got these dark blue dots, you're going to want to mark that as well. And the way that I do this, if I just whip those pins out here, the sun has come out. Hurrah! Okay, so I want to mark this little blue dot here, and I'm cutting a size 8, so I should just put my pin through the size 8 dot there, through both layers of fabric in the same place, and then I'll just make a little mark on the fabric. It's very easy for me to see which is the right and which is the wrong side of the fabric because I'm working with a print. If you're working with something that's not very obvious, just be consistent, so decide which is your right side, and then you can put your markings for the pocket. You want them on the right side, on the outside, because this is going to be a guide for where you place your pocket. On the wrong side, if I've got a fabric that's a bit tricky, all I do is I just put a little X in a bright coloured chalk on the corner of each piece on the wrong side, and then that helps keep everything together. So I'm going to use for this fabric, I think what's going to show up best is my zebra pen, which is a friction pen, and I'm just going to put a little black dot there where I put that corner through, and this is heat erasable, so once I iron this, that will disappear, and you can use whatever method you like to mark that. So that's my front trouser done. I can now, oh, we've got another little mark down here, I forgot about that one. That's at the hem there, where you've got your little split at your ankle, very stylish. So again, I put my pin through this dot for size 8, and I will just transfer those markings onto my fabric, so I have a guide. Those ones I'll put on the outside, the wrong side and the right side of the fabric actually. There we go. So I'm going to go ahead now and repeat that process for the other pieces before cutting out the rest of my trousers. Now what you can do once you've taken that pattern piece away is you can just draw a line from that mark that you made out to the notch at the side of your fabric. I'm just using a fine chalk pen for this, so it's very faint and it will wash out. Same from the top there, from that notch at the top down to that mark there, just in my white chalk, so it's very, very faint, but I can see it. It shows up a bit more in the green areas than it does the kind of whitish areas. Same on the other side, and this will just help me when I come to place my pocket on later. This will help me, and if you are using the linen, this is really nice, it shows up really nicely. The viscose is a bit more tricky to see with this lovely busy print that we've got, but there's my notch. That's just going to give me a guide when I come to place my pocket. That's just going to give me a guide of where I'm putting my pocket. So I've got a line coming in and up there, and I've got a line there going from the notches to that point that I transferred. So I've drawn my fabric up and I've put my back leg here, making sure that I measure the grain line to the fold to make sure that it's parallel, and I've pinned that in place. And then you'll see that you've got this spare piece of fabric here with the fold here, and once that's opened up, that will be big enough for you to cut out your back and front waistbands. Set those just to one side for now. I'll cut across the top of my back leg. And then I shall just leave that ready for those waistband pattern pieces, and I shall come back to that in a minute. So I'm just going to cut out this back leg, and then I'm going to mark the corners of my pockets and the position of my opening at the bottom of my leg, snip into the little notches as before, and then just the waistband to do once we've done that. I've opened out the remaining piece of fabric ready to cut out my waistbands, and I can use that fold that I pressed there as my grain line guide. So I'm just going to pop my back and front waistband pieces like this, using that fold as a grain line guide. I'll pin them in place and then cut them out, and I've just got these notches to mark here. Now, one thing that I learned from making my trousers, my shorts rather, was that you don't have much space for threading the elastic through on this waistband. So what I decided was, when I make them again, I made a mental note that I would make the waistband a bit bigger. So I'm going to do that. Once I've pinned these in place, when I cut them out, I'm just going to draw a line sort of 1.5 centimetres above the top there, just to make the waistband just that little bit wider, just give me a bit more room for threading in my elastic and make that job a bit easier for me. So I'm just going to increase the width of the waistband by 1.5 centimetres on the back and front waistbands. So I'm going to pin those, draw that extra 1.5 onto the fabric and get those cut out now. So just to explain, I've pinned these waistbands on, and then using my ruler I've just drawn a line 1.5 centimetres above, and that's where I'll cut. With this pattern, what you do is you make the waistband and then you put this extra stitch across the top, which looks really nice because it creates this casing for the waistband. But what I found is you're supposed to do that stitch 1/2 inch down, and once I did that the first time round, just the gap that's left there for you to get that elastic in I found to be too small. So I unpicked it and did it a bit higher up, giving myself a bit more room for my elastic to thread through. So what I thought is that when I come to cut these trousers out again, I would just give myself a slightly wider waistband. So that's what I'm doing there. And it's up to you whether you do that or whether you stick to the pattern. But I think just having that slightly wider waistband gives you just that little bit more room, and you won't have sort of such difficulty in getting your elastic through. So whatever you do on the front waistband, make sure you do the same on the back. And because I've just made that small adjustment to this pattern, I will leave the markings off for now, because this notch is now not in the right place. Also, I'm going to leave the buttonhole markings off, and we'll come back to that later because they're going to now be ever so slightly different. So there you go, that's how that will look. And I'll just put a little notch here and here because those haven't changed, but I'll leave those markings for now. So everything is cut out. Let's just run through what we've got. I've got my pair of trouser fronts, my pair of trouser backs, so front legs, back legs, one pair of each, pair of patch pockets. I've got 2 strips of fabric for my ties. I've got my back and front waistband, my pocket facings, a pair of those, and my pair of pockets for the front. I've got a little addition of the binding, which I'm going to have a little play with See how that looks as a drawstring at the front. Got my non-roll elastic, a safety pin, my matching thread, and some strips of 1 inch wide fusible medium weight soft interfacing. I've got my packet of scraps here, all my little offcuts, great for testing my stitches on. So that's everything that we need, as well as our instructions to make our trousers. What I'm going to do now is go over, thread up my sewing machine, thread up my overlocker, and get my ironing board set up, and we'll get to making these trousers.